The Rebbe began the Farbrengen this afternoon that it is Yud Beis Tammuz today, and together with it, it is also the Shabbos of Parshas Chukas-Balak. Parshas Chukas-Balak is a combination of two sedras. Normally, in other words, there is a possibility that we can have each sedra separate. Chukas is a sedra in itself, and Balak is a sedra in itself. However, as this year's Kviyas is, it falls out to be that Chukas and Balak are combined. In what way is it combined? That we read it as one Kriya with the same 7 people. It doesn't mean that we read 7 people for Chukas, as 7 people for Balak. As the Rebbe says, the minig is in Yemen, there was a custom that when 2 sedras came together, they would read 2 complete sedras and call up 7 people to each of the sedras. Our custom is not so. Though the custom in Yemen definitely was also based, they had it based on grounds how it was makubal to do there, but the way we do it by us, it is acceptable that we combine both sedras together. And the person whose aliyah is Revi, he makes his bracha Rishayna still in Parshas Chukas, and the bracha Achayna he makes in Parshas Balak. In other words, Revi is the parsha that combines both sedras together, the sedra of Chukas and Balak. However, the Rebbe noted, in Eretz Yisrael this Shabbos, it is not so. In Eretz Yisrael this Shabbos, they read only Parshas Balak. What originated this change between us and Eretz Yisrael? As previously already mentioned, it all started in Shavuos. Shavuos this year fell out Friday and Shabbos by us, so we have 2 days Yontif, so we had Friday and Shabbos. So Shabbos we weren't able to read Parshas Nosai, because we read the Kriya of Yontif of 2nd day of Shavuos. However, in Eretz Yisrael, they only have 1 day Yontif. So in Eretz Yisrael, Shavuos was on a Friday. So that Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael, they began reading already Parshas Nosai. So since Shavuos till now, Eretz Yisrael is ahead of us with 1 Parsha. And this Shabbos, we are straightening out between us and Eretz Yisrael. We Yidden and Golas, are all over in Golas, but I mean rather Yidden and Chutz La'aretz, are reading Parshas Chukas and Balak together, as opposed to the Yidden and Eretz Yisrael, who are reading only Parshas Balak. But again, the Rebbe stressed, the area where most of the followers of the Frierdiker Rebbe, whose Inyan is Yud Beis Tammuz, are, most of the people, as the expression goes, the Gemara says, Ma zaroi b'chayim, af hu b'chayim, just like his children are alive. This makes it considered as if he would be alive. This is what the Gemara says, Benegei Yankov Avinu. So the Rebbe applied the same expression, Benegei the Frierdiker Rebbe. Most of the followers of the Frierdiker Rebbe are in Chutz La'aretz. There's a larger number as opposed to the number of followers that are in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore the Inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz has a strong shaychus to the sedras of Chukas and Balak together as it is read in Chutz La'aretz. And here the Rebbe referred to the letter which the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote a year after he was released. In other words, the first time when Yud Beis Tammuz was really celebrated in the year 1928, Frierdiker Rebbe was released in 1927, Tafresh Pei Zayin. And in 1928, the Frierdiker Rebbe gave out a maimah in honor of Yud Beis Tammuz. The maimah begins, Asara sheyeshvim v'oiskim b'Torah, it's a Mishnah. And together with it, the Rebbe also wrote a letter. In the letter that the Rebbe wrote, there the Rebbe urges very strongly for the Inyan of Kviyus Itim b'Torah Bichlal, and particularly the Rebbe stresses in that letter the greatness of a Kviyus Itim b'Torah when there are 10 participants in the Kviyus. And 10 participants brings it up to the level of Asara sheyeshvim v'oiskim b'Torah. And that is a very high madrega. And the Rebbe there explains that though at times one may feel that if he would learn for himself, he may be able to accomplish more than if he would be learning with a group of people. He may consider himself that he may be at a higher level of learning and so forth. So the Rebbe there stresses that together with this great mitzvah of Talmud Torah Ba'asara, he's also mekayim the mitzvah of Tzedakah Ba'asara. And to be mekayim the mitzvah of Tzedakah Ba'asara, this is a spiritual tzedakah. Tzedakah mustn't only be in the physical sense of one making a contribution and dollars and cents, it can also be a spiritual type of contribution whereby one gives of his time and participates in shiurim, seeing to it that there are 10 people in the shiur, even though that the other participants in the shiur are not up to his level of learning Torah. The inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz has a special stress. The Rebbe continued when Yud Beis Tammuz falls out on a Shabbos, because as we know, Shabbos, it's very much stressed the great Maila of Oinig. The Karasa la Shabbos Oinig. The whole idea of Shabbos is a special type of a comfort, a special type of a relaxation. This is the whole inyan of Shabbos, to such an extent that the Chazal tell us Shina b'Shabbos Tainik. Normally, when a person sleeps, it's not shaykh that he should fulfill any mitzvah. He's asleep. However, Shabbos is such a high inyan that we are told that even the sleep of the Yid on Shabbos can also be referred to as a tainug, as a joy. So here we are talking where we get the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz. And Yud Beis Tammuz has a shaykhus to each and every Yid, as the Frierdiker Rebbe himself writes in the letter. Loi oisi bilvad goal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is not only he himself who the Rebishter has redeemed, but koil asher b'shem Yisrael yechuneh. Anybody that can only be referred to as a Yid, the idea of Yud Beis Tammuz has a shaykhus to this person as well. And the Rebbe always keeps on stressing that the Frierdiker Rebbe used the expression in the letter, asher b'shem Yisrael yechuneh. Can yechuneh, we know that in Lashon HaKodesh everything is extremely accurate. Yechuneh stems from the word kinu. Kinu usually in Hebrew can be fit also for the use of a nickname. In other words, the inyan of Yisrael is not something primary in this person, it's even something secondary in him. Yisrael is only a kinu to this person, because this person is not in the proper standards of Yisrael, and Yisrael is only a kinu to him. So even to such a person, Yud Beis Tammuz has a shaykhus to take to such an extent that the Frierdiker Rebbe refers to it, that the Geula has a shaykhus to these Yidden as well. And here the Rebbe, while talking about the inyan of every Yid being named B'Shem Yisrael, even by others it is only in a format of a nickname, here the Rebbe also explained the idea of giving a name, in general giving a name. The Rebbe referred to the famous inyan which is quoted, Tzemach Tzedek brings, quoted from Kabbalah, that when parents name a child, it is an inyan of a nevuah. How does it come that parents decide on this particular name or on any other type of a particular name whenever a child is born? This is some sort of a mini nevuah which the Rebishter gives to the parents. And it is through this name that the child receives his chayis. In other words, throughout the entire life of a person, his chayis is channeled through his name. Here we're talking that this whole inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz, which has a shaykhus to each and every Yid, because every Yid falls into the category of B'Shem Yisrael Yechuneh. Now this falls out to be on a Shabbos, so it's a yet higher celebration of Yud Beis Tammuz, because of Shabbos standing for the fact of a Karos ala Shabbos Einig, Shabbos bringing about Einig and joy to each and every Yid. And here the Rebbe also referred to the Pasuk. Pasuk tells, Pasuk in Chumash Devarim, Kisotzur el Ir, and the Pasuk goes on saying, Ad Ridita, that if Yidden are involved in a Mulchama and they have to take over a city, Pasuk says, Ad Ridita, until you complete taking over the city. So the Rebbe referred to the Gemara, there's a Gemara that says, Ad Ridita afilu b'Shabbos. That at times Yidden may be forced, that they may be involved in a Mulchama, which is b'negei the rescue, saving the lives of Yidden, which may force them to take part in such a Milchama even in Shabbos. And here naturally the Rebbe was referring to what's going on now in Eretz Yisrael, what's going on in Lebanon. And this is an inyan which Yidden are allowed to take part even in Shabbos. And the Rebbe mentioned briefly today, in continuation what the Rebbe spoke already in the middle of the week, when it was the part Eitonis, that we are in a situation where we're seeing tremendous nisim from the Rebishter. We don't even realize the great miracles which the Rebishter is performing to the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, and should be fulfilled what the Pasuk says, B'gdoil zroyacha yidmu ka'aven, that they should fall ka'aven like stones, realizing the great arm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Rebbe spoke that in order to bring about the shalom between the Rebishter and the Yidden should be in an obvious way, that Yidden shouldn't suffer any losses and any casualties, it's advisable that Yidden amongst themselves should also be marbe b'shalom, bein ish l'reyehu, as well as bein ish l'ishtoi, to stress the fact of shalom, and this will bring about a stronger shalom between, as the Gemara says, ish zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also referred to as ish, and who is the ish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? This is Knesset Yisrael. Yidden are entitled the ish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so whereby Yidden will stress an extra amount of shalom, bein ish l'reyehu, as well as bein ish l'ishtoi. This will bring about an extra amount of shalom between ish l'isha in the spiritual sense, between the Rebishter and Knesset Yisrael, that the Rebishter will see to it that Yidden will not suffer any casualties or any losses, not even any type of not talking from any physical losses, nor even any financial losses. Yidden also shouldn't suffer. Yidden shouldn't know of them from any losses whatsoever. But as it says in Svarim, that there's an inyan of Tayameha Chayim Zochu, meaning that just like there's a halacha that Erev Shabbos we are to taste the foods of Shabbos, the same the Rebbe always keeps on stressing, we are right now in a spiritual period of Erev Shabbos. When Mashiach will come, that time is compared to a Shabbos. So right now it is Erev Shabbos. So we're asking the Rebishter should give us now already to taste from that type of peace, from that type of ruchnistic life, which will be going on when Mashiach will come. Stressed, even the Tzionim, it's something which is so obvious that everybody, even Zionists, are also recognizing that there are an obvious nisim from the Rebishter in this war which is presently taking place in Eretz Yisrael. Now that we have this Shabbos, a combination of both Sedres, Chukas and Balak, as the Rebbe stressed earlier, Rebbe said the only thing is the maftir, which is said in Shul, normally we say from the second Sedra from Pashas Balak. Why don't we say both Haftarahs? This the Rebbe says it's brought in Svarim because of Tirche de Tzibura, not to hold up the entire community, not to hold up the public. However, the Rebbe says there is those that are Mavis Sedre. There are many customs that when one is Mavis Sedre, he says both Haftarahs. He says the maftir of Pashas Chukas as well as the maftir of Pashas Balak. So the Rebbe raised the question, being that Chukas and Balak are so strongly together this week, as previously explained, that we go automatically from one Sedra into the other, and this is read by the Kriya of one particular person, Pashas Revi, combines both Sedras. Based on this, the Rebbe says, obviously it seems that both the names of the Sedras are a little bit contradictory one to the other. Why? We're talking Chukas. Chukas means, a commandment. So as we know, mitzvahs are divided into three categories. Eidus, Chukim, and Mishpatim. What's the category of Chukim? As Chazal say, Chukah chokakti, Gzeira gazarti, ve'ein lecha reshus laharer acher. The Rebishter says this is a set rule, this is a set chayk, and you have no reshus to have any kind of doubts in your mind after it. That's the idea of Chukah. So what does Chukah stand for? The strongest dedication that shaykh to the Rebishter, putting ourselves totally aside. We put our own understanding totally on the side, and we think of fulfilling the Rebishter's will without any reason of our own. This is what Pashas Chukas stands for. Pashas Balak brings a story which is completely contradictory to the idea of Chukas. Here we read a story about a Balak and Bilam. Balak were people, Balak Melech Moav, who had a strong hatred to the Yidden. Hinekisa Sein Haaretz, came complaining to Bilam and the Yidden. Bilam himself was also not a follower of the will of Hashem. And this is basically what the story of Balak is. So how do these two stories, the story of Pashas Balak, how does this come together with the story of Pashas Chukas? And as the Rebbe explained, based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that everything that a Yid hears or sees, he's to take a lesson in Avodas Hashem, and all in Yonim Abahashgoche Pratis. Furthermore, as the Rebbe used the expression today, everything is like a mirror. We put ourselves into a mirror. Everything that we hear or see has some sort of a reflection on us, and we have to take our lesson, how this reflects on us, from whatever inyan we come in contact with. So the inyan of Chukas is obvious. However, the inyan of Chukas-Balak, the Rebbe explains, this stresses the greatness of tshuva. In other words, a person is given a complete view of whatever took place, whatever transpired between Balak and Bilam. And when one looks at it properly, puts himself in the mirror and visualizes this whole inyan, whatever took place at that time when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim and all those details, this shows a person the greatness of tshuva. In other words, here a person sees how wrong it is to go against the will of Hashem, and in the event, had he gone against the will of Hashem, the need to do tshuva and correct it and get back and be fully associated with the Rebishter. So, in essence, the Rebbe continues, there is a shaykhus between Chukas and Balak, because Chukas-Balak is not something which tells only about something or someone which went against the will of the Rebishter. On the contrary, Bilam Takir did not listen to the Rebishter. However, the way we look at it, the reflection we take from this story, how we derive a lesson from it, is that even when one does not follow the will of Hashem, and one does not listen to what the Rebishter told him, as the particular case was with Bilam, we know that there is a dinyan of tshuva, and we know that if should it happen by any one of us, that we have not fulfilled the will of the Rebishter properly, here as we see broadly in the story of Balak and Bilam, this leaves room for a Yid to do tshuva. Then the Rebbe went on that when the Frierdiker Rebbe was notified that he was being released from prison, so we know in the details of the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrest, it was the first 17 days, I think, he was kept in prison in Leningrad. Later, he was sent off to a small city called Kostroma, and that is where he was allowed to be only in that city, and he had no permission to leave this little town, this little city of Kostroma. When the news came to the Rebbe that he was being released, the Rebbe immediately in Kostroma already said a maimah Chasidus. In other words, the Rebbe did not wait till he came back and reassociated with the family and with the Hasidim, and then to celebrate by saying a maimah, which he also did, but immediately in Kostroma he also said a maimah Chasidus. How did the maimah begin? The maimah which he said in Kostroma began with Baruch Hagoyme L'Chayavim Toive Shegmalani Toiv, which this is something which one goes through prison. He's mechuyev to bench goimel, as we will see in a minute. Sforim tell us there are 4 categories of those that have to say the bracha of Birchas HaGoimel. And in order we should be able to memorize it, it is abbreviated in a word, Chaim. V'chol HaChaim yiduchas ela. Chaim will praise you. So what does Chaim stand for? All the 4 general categories of those that have to recite Birchas HaGoimel. Ches stands for Chayla. If one was severely ill, we know once he recuperates, he has to bench Goimel. Yud is Yisurim, and in Yisurim naturally it's included if a person was imprisoned, naturally this is quite a high standard of Yisurim, so he as well is obligated to bench Goimel. The second Yud stands for Yam. He traveled on the ocean, and as we know, ocean travelers are required to bench Goimel. And Mem stands for Midbar, someone who went for a journey through a midbar, through a desert, and traveling a desert is something which is extremely dangerous, and he held out and came out safely, so he as well also has to praise the Rebishter by making the bracha of Birchas HaGoyim. The Frierdiker Rebbe, in this maimah, which he already said while being in Kostroma, which just explained, there he explains, first of all, what's the pshat? Baruch HaGoyimel L'Chayovim Toives. We thank the Rebishter who has done good, L'Chayovim, to those who are Chayiv. What's the pshat to those who are Chayiv? The Rebishter has committed good to any individual, to any Jew, to any person. Why is there a stress? Baruch Hagoyme L'Chayovim Toives. He has committed this good, Hashem has committed this good with those who are Chayiv, with those who are sort of like, let me use the expression, with those who are guilty. He committed the good to whom? To those who are Chayovim. As well, the Frierdiker Rebbe there explains that this whole inyan, besides it being halachically, there's also a spiritual interpretation to it as well. And in Ruchni, spiritually, there are also these four categories of Chayli, Yam, Yisurim, Midbar. Meaning, in spiritual level, how one is spiritually ill, or one spiritually has wandered off into a far-off desert, or one is drowned in a yam. What's the pshat? He's drowned into the yam. He's drowned into the yam, into the deep waters of Parnasa, and therefore this rips him off totally from having a shaykhs to a kfisit and b'teira, or having a shaykhs to being involved in inyan in which a yid is supposed to be involved. And as a result of one falling into any of these categories, whether it's chayle, yam, yisurim, or midbar, this makes this individual being considered a chayav. He is guilty. Why is he guilty? Because in the spiritual sense, he has created this spiritual situation for himself. In other words, he has wandered off into the far midbar, into a far desert, into a spiritual desert. So whose fault is it that he's in the desert? Naturally, it's his own fault. So that is why he is considered a chayav, as well as for any other of the other three categories, which the Rebbe explains in that Maimer from Tafresh Pei Zayin, which this makes this individual consider himself being considered a chayav. So here we come about, and we thank the Rebishter for, though we are chayav, we are guilty. In other words, it is our fault that we have brought ourselves into one of these spiritual categories, which is considered a danger, a spiritual danger. So here we thank, and when the Rebishter comes and takes us out of this madrega, we thank the Rebishter by expressing Birchas HaGoimel, Baruch HaGoimel L'Chayavim Tov Shirmalani Tov. We thank the Rebishter that has committed good with us, but we are the guilty ones. We consider ourselves chayavim. In other words, we did the wrong part. We have misled ourselves and got involved into a spiritual danger. However, Hashem was the one who took us out of the spiritual danger, took us chayavim, us guilty ones, out of this danger and has rescued us. Which this is the idea of goimel, of birchas ha-goimel in the spiritual sense. Later in the Farbrengen, as usual, the Rebbe learned the Rashi in this week's Seder, as well as the Likutei Levi Yitzchak, and the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, today is the 5th Perik. Perik Hamishi begins with Ba'asara Ma'amoris Nivra Ha'olam. That the Rebishter created the world with Asara Ma'amoris. Very famous concept. Then the Mishnah goes on, U'ma Talmud Loima, it was possible for Hashem to create the world even with one saying as well. Why did he need 10? Elo, the Mishnah goes on. So that the Rebishter should get even with the Rishoyim who ruined the world which was created with Asara Mamoris, and to have an opportunity to give proper reward, an abundance of reward to the tzaddikim who bring the world which was created with the 10 sayings to existence. The Rebbe has several questions in this Mishnah. If we look carefully, the Rebbe noted, the Mishnah discusses the chashivas of certain numbers. Number 10 is given a lot of chashivas. After the Mishnah finishes with number 10, Mishnah goes over to number 7, afterwards to number 4, all outstanding numbers. Incidentally, the Rebbe asked, why doesn't the Mishnah make any issue of number 8? It's also a chashiva number. In fact, the Rebbe says there's a Chazal. The Chazal tells us that Mashiach has eight names. Moshe Rabbeinu had 7 names, and Mashiach has 8 names. But for whatever reason, the Mishnah does not get involved into the greatness of number 8. Mishnah sticks to the greatness of number 10, 7, and 4. A very obvious question, if the Mishnah comes to tell us all great things that revolve number 10, there's another very, very famous inyan in number 10, and that is Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. Something extremely basic. The basic of the entire Torah. Torah was given. Initially it was the Aseres HaDibros. There is no mention in the Mishnah of the Aseres HaDibros. Mishnah talks about Asara Mamoros, Eser Doiros, 10 Nisyonos, 10 Nisim the Rebishter performed in the Beis HaMikdash, 10 Nisim the Rebishter performed in Mitzrayim, 10 on the Yam. everything, all great inyanim that have a shaykhs that bring out the number of 10. The Mishnah does not make any mention of the greatness of number 10 as it pertains to the Aseres HaDibros. Also the Rebbe asks, if we look into the Mishnah carefully, Mishnah is out to give us a reason why the Rebbe created the world by Asara Mamoris. What does the Mishnah say? It is lihipara min harashoyim, to get even with the Rashoyim, that ruined the world which was created by Asara Mamoris, and give good schar to the tzaddikim who are bringing kiyum to the world, who are sustaining the world. The Rebbe says, firstly, the Mishnah should say that the Rebbe is giving schar to the tzaddikim. That's the primary inyan. Afterwards comes secondary the fact that he's lihipara min harashoyim shema'abdin esrei. But first and foremost, the Mishnah should mention the fact that the Rebbe is giving schar to the tzaddikim who are upkeeping the world. A very big arichos, very lengthy explanation. The Rebbe learned a complete new pshat in the Mishnah. Rebbe learns as follows. Mishnah tells us, Ba'asara Mamoris Nivra Olam. Why? Mishnah says, Lihipara min harashoyim, shema'abdin es ha'olam shenivra ba'asara Mamoris. The Rebbe is getting even with the Rashoyim who are destroying the world which was created by Asara Mamoris. So here the Rebbe quoted a pasuk in Shmuel, where the pasuk in Shmuel uses the expression, V'choil asher yaseh yarshia. Everything that he will do, yarshia. Again, the same word as Roshe. But there the pshat is not Roshe, the pshat is yatzliach. V'choil asher yaseh yarshia, meaning yatzliach, he will succeed. So we see that the word Roshe can have a different total meaning, completely different meaning whatsoever. It doesn't altogether. Thank you. It doesn't mean only the concept of rishos, of one being wicked, which we are constantly used to. It can mean a high level of success. Such a level of success, meaning that he's breaking boundaries. Something out of the ordinary routine. And this is what the Mishnah is telling us here. Why was the world created by Asara Mamoris? Ella. Lihipara min harashoyim. The Rebbe should be able to pay back. Lihipara means to pay back. The exact interpretation, the Rebbe also asked, why does the Mishnah use the expression lihipara? If the Pashat Pshat would mean it, obviously, to penalize Rishoyim, the Mishnah could have used the expression lahanish as a Rishoyim. Or another type of a similar expression. Lihipara means to pay up, to pay back. This is the exact translation of the word piroin in Lashon Kodesh. Piroin means to pay back. The Rebbe is paying back the Rishoyim. What's the pshat the Rishoyim? The one who was a Rasha, however, he was chayzer b'tshuva, and he totally succeeded breaking up his rishos, broke up his old derech of rishos, broke that completely, and he's matzliach now. Now we're using the term Rosh als yatzliach. Now he's succeeding in doing tshuva. Shema abdin es ha'olam. What's the pshat? He's ma'abed es ha'olam. He's ruining his old world. Olam is also meloshen helem vehester. Chassidus always keeps on stressing that olam derives from the word of a cover-up. Normally the world covers up an elokus. Godliness is not seen in the world. So this world is a helem. It's a cover on godliness, and godliness cannot be revealed and is not revealed. So this Rasha here is destroying this type of a world. In other words, he's doing tshuva, and the world which was initially created by Asara Mamoris, his old world, he's breaking this world. And this is the pshat. The Rebbe could have created the world with one maima. Why did he need Asara Mamoris? And this is what the Mishnah is answering. Not the pshat that the Mishnah is talking here. First and foremost, as we learned the Pashat pshat, that the Rebbe first and foremost is the inyan is to punish the Rishoyim. Chas v'shalom, this is not what the Mishnah is talking about. On the contrary, the Mishnah here is talking about that the Rebbe is giving a lending hand to the one who was previously a Rasha, and now he's breaking this way. breaking away from his rishus totally, and has selected a new way, and he's referred to as a Rasha not because of his rishus. He's referred to as a Rasha because of his success in his new way. Because success can be referred to as rishus based on the pasuk V'choil asher yaseh yarshia. Their meaning yatzliach. So Memele here the Mishnah is telling us that the Rebishter is lipara min harashoim. He's paying back this Bal Tshuva, who was ma'abed es ha'olam, who was destroying the hell and vehesta of world. Shenivra ba'asora ma'amores, because the world which was created ba'asora ma'amores has a tremendous hell and vehesta. This individual is breaking this hell and vehesta. He's trying to introduce Getlachkeit into the world. He's trying to bring a new view of godliness, a view of Kedusha into this world. And this is what the Mishnah is talking about. And the Mishnah then also continues, and also to give a proper reward to the tzaddikim, meaning the one who was always righteous, who never had to come on to a derech of tshuva, that he's mekayim esoilam shenivra ba'asara ma'amoros. With regard to the question, why the Mishnah does not make any mention of the Aseres HaDibros, which is something so outstanding with a number of 10, and Mishnah bypasses it and does not mention it. Obviously, this should have been one of the first in Yonim. We know that Bereishis, B'shvil Yisrael shenikru Reishis, and B'shvil HaTorah shenikru Reishis. Why did the Rebishter create the world with the Asara Mamoris, which the Mishnah is talking about? The Rebishter created it B'shvil HaTorah, and Torah is Asara Mamoris, Aseres HaDibros rather. So Aseres HaDibros is not made any mention of, and the Mishnah talks about Asara Mamoris and various other inyanim that have a shaykhs to Asar. So this the Rebbe explained as follows. Well, explained that the Mishnah does not just select numbers at random. Not the Pshat. The Mishnah took inyanim that all have a shaykhs to Asara, and the Mishnah took all these inyanim and put them together. Pshat is different. Pshat is that there is some greatness in number of 10, and that is why the Mishnah discusses all these inyanim, because there's something very outstanding in number 10. What has made number 10 so outstanding? Why is number 10 so great amongst numbers? The fact that Aseres HaDibros. So Memele, the Mishnah cannot tell us Aseres HaDibros as one of the inyanim as one of the many inyanim which are involved with number 10. The Mishnah should count equally Aseres HaDibros as well. This would be wrong. Why? Because the whole reason why number 10 is so outstanding is due to Aseres HaDibros. So the Mishnah cannot insert Aseres HaDibros now at the same level with all the other inyanim that deal with number 10, because it is Aseres HaDibros that has given greatness to number 10 and given such outstandingness to number 10 is all due to Aseres HaDibros. And this Mishnah cannot talk here, because here the Mishnah is talking all other inyanim which are also in the category of number 10. But why is number 10 so great? Why is there such a chshivas to number 10? Because of Aseres HaDibros. So that is why the Mishnah here cannot make any mention of Aseres HaDibros. Aseres HaDibros is not in equal shaykhs as all the other inyanim which are discussed here. All other inyanim have something common within themselves. They are all takeh 10. Why is number 10 so chashiv as opposed to any other number? Because of Aseres HaDibros. And here the Rebbe also stressed, Ba'asara ma'amoris nivra olam u'ma talmud loima. What's the pshat u'ma talmud loima? Mishnah wants to give reason why the Rebishter created the world ba'asara ma'amoris. So Mishnah could have said any other type of expression. Why Mishnah uses the expression u'ma talmud loima? Talmud is melashon limud, melashon learning. So this is another reminder that the ba'asara ma'amoris nivra olam. And the Asara Mamoris Nivra Olam, as just explained, why is there greatness to a number 10? Because of Aseres HaDibros. As just explained, the world was created because of Torah. Bereishis b'shvil HaTorah shenikru Reishis, or b'shvil Yisrael shenikru Reishis. So right away, as soon as the Mishnah makes mention of the reason of creating of the world, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world b'Asara Mamoris, the Mishnah right away throws in a reminder, Talmud Loima. You should know that there's an inyan of Talmud. The whole idea of Brias HaOlam was you should sit and learn, you should learn Torah. That's the idea of Asara Mamoris. Why Nivra Olam? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the world? Because of Talmud Loima. Otherwise the Mishnah could have used a different expression. There are many other expressions in Hebrew which the Mishnah could have used. Ba'asara Mamoris Nivra Olam. Or maybe the Mishnah could have even done away with the three words. Ba'asara Mamoris Nivra Olam. Why does the Mishnah have to add in additional three words of Ma Talmud Loima? Because this comes to tell us that the whole idea of the creation of the world, why the Rebbe created the world, is all because of Talmud Loima. A Yid should sit and learn Torah. Because of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also referred to what he spoke previously, the letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, how Limud HaTorah has a great advantage when it is Ba'asara, and at the same time one has the chance to fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah ba'asara, spiritual tzedakah. Here the Rebbe referred to the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandfather. In fact, the Frierdiker Rebbe was named after him, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Avruch. And this Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, in his young days, I think he was a son-in-law by the Tzemach Tzedek. So when the Tzemach Tzedek took him as a son-in-law, he made up with him that during weekdays, in the week, he should daven tefillah b'tzibur. And obviously, what do we interpret tefillah b'tzibur? Meaning davening with the minyan. As a short period of time passed by, and the Tzemach Tzedek watched how his actions were, he realized that he's not davening with the minyan. He's davening much longer. When he had an opportunity, he told him, didn't we make up that in the weekdays you will be davening b'tzibur? And I see that your attitude is different. Why is it? He said, why don't you understand? What does tzibur mean? Tzibur means gathering. You know, Pashat means that there's a gathering of 10 Yidden. And we know that when there's a gathering of 10 Yidden, the Rebbe accepts the tefillah, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moyes b'tfilosan shel Rabbi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts the tefillah of 10 people. However, he says, he interprets tefillah b'tzibur in a spiritual sense a little bit different. Being that we know that a person consists of Eser Koiches HaNefesh, there are 10 Koiches within every person, what he tries to do is daven with all of his Eser Koiches HaNefesh. And to daven with all of his Eser Koiches HaNefesh is not that easy. It's time consuming. It takes him quite a bit of time till he can organize himself to such a level of having all his Eser Koiches HaNefesh involved in tefillah, and that is why he cannot finish together with the minyan. During the weekdays it takes him a little bit longer because he wants to be mitzaber, he wants to gather his Eser Koiches HaNefesh as well. Rabbi referring to this incident so that we have to take a lesson from it as well, that when we are involved in any type of inyan, as the lesson from the letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe calls, that we should be involved in Torah and in tefillah and in tzedakah, and all in Yonim we should be involved in the way of tzibur. It has to be done. It should be done. We should have this story in mind that we should follow this example. It should be done in such a way of gathering the koiches hanefesh, all the 10 koiches hanefesh, meaning that a person should dedicate himself solely to the inyan of Kriyasit and B'Torah, as well as to the inyan of tzedakah. All of this should be done with the fullest dedication, just like we find in this story the idea of gathering all the Eser Koiches HaNefesh, and this is what is considered tzibur. The same thing b'negeya limud HaTorah b'tzibur, or negeya, nesinas hatzedakah b'tzibur. It should all be in the same type of a way. When the Rebbe was talking here, and the Rebbe spoke about it as well as b'shaychus to the Lekutei Levi Yitzchak. Lekutei Levi Yitzchak, there's an expression in this week's Sedre. The Rebbe's father quotes a Zohar, where the Zohar tells us about Rabbi Yehuda, Havi Yodei Muluchlochin. Rabbi Yehuda's hands were not clean. V'notl Yodei, so therefore he had to wash his hands. So there's a whole length explanation here, Al Pi Kabbalah, from the Rebbe's father, how he explains this whole Zohar Al Pi Kabbalah. But the Rebbe always keeps on stressing, and today's Farbrengen as well stressed very strongly, that we know HaMaisa Hu Ha'ika. Whatever is most important is action, Maisa. In other words, all interpretations are very fine and very good, but what's really primary is to bring out a lesson, what we can derive from this, what we can do in actuality from all these inyanim. And the Rebbe, see here in the Zohar, it's a whole Zohar relates an episode which took place of between Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yehuda. So Rebbe's father explains why Rabbi Yehuda had to wash his hands as opposed to Rabbi Yitzchak who did not have to.
Obviously, he explains it what Shaykh's in Kabbalah Rabbi Yitzchak's neshama was, and what Shaykh's Rabbi Yehuda's neshama was, and so forth. But the way the Rebbe explained it, Ha'maisa Hu'ika, the Rebbe keeps on using an expression, a Russian expression, Tapora da Placho, which means also, main thing is, action is what counts. So the Rebbe here explained, B'shaychus to the inyan of Avas Yisrael. And the Rebbe demanded, based on what the Alter Rebbe discusses in Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya, how a Yid has to dedicate himself, one Jew has to have total dedication and love to another Yid. At the very highest level. Benegei Tzedakah, the Rebbe spoke as well. If you're out to convince another Yid, in other words, we're out to convince him that he should go ahead and be Mekayim the mitzvah of Tzedakah. And what will be the approach? Because there's a Medrash, the Medrash tells us, Atah Yesas Nefesh Ha'ani, that the Rebbe says, you have given life to the soul of the poor. Rebbe promises, in case a time will come when you will have to come on, you will be in the same position, the Rebbe will not forget it, the Rebbe will repay and give you the same. So based on this, the Rebbe stressed very strongly how at times we have to be involved totally in the Gashmius of a Yid. And see to it to convince others as well to be involved totally in the Gashmius of the Yid, of another Yid. As the expression in Tanya is, expression the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, V'kula hayloi hifsid, one has not lost, he hasn't lost anything. Why? Because by being fully dedicated to another Yid, he hasn't lost anything, because at the most he gained the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, which is a very major mitzvah. So the Rebbe tied it into this Zayar. At times one may say, Yadav Meluch Lachen, he's dirtying his hands. Why? Because he wants to be involved only in spiritual inyanim. He wants and does not want to have any shaykhs to be involved in such gashmiistic inyanim of really inyanim that are totally gashmiistic. So here we see from the Zayah that the Zayah is talking about a great sage like Rabbi Yehuda. And Yadav Meluch Lachen, he still dirties his hands, but at the same time when one dirties his hands, there's an eitzah. The eitzah is the hands could always be washed. The hands could always be cleaned. And this is no excuse for a person to say he doesn't want to dirty himself, doesn't want to get involved. It's not befitting for him to go ahead and be involved in Gashmi's, the kinyanim of other Yidden, and worrying about and seeing to it that another Yid should give tzedakah and raising tzedakah and other types of things, saying that this is not befitting for him. He has higher things to be involved in. It is not so. Because even if he has higher things, there's an eitzah, notl yada, after him being involved in such gashmis the kinyanim, he will wash off his hands in a spiritual sense, and again will be able to go back to his high inyanim. Benegei the Zayar in this week's Sedre, Benegei the Rashi, the Rebbe learned the pasuk in Parshas Balak. It's a pasuk in Parshas Balak, right after Shlishi, the first pasuk. Kapitel Chav Beis, pasuk Chav Aleph. Pasuk says, Vayakam Bilam Babayka. Bilam woke up in the morning. Vayachvish es hasoinoi, vayelach imsori moyav. He himself took his camel, his ezel, donkey, and vayelach imsori moyav, and he went with the ministers of Moav. What does Rashi comment? Rashi quotes the words Vayachvish es hasoinoi. Rashi explains, Mikan, from here we see, Shehasina mikalkeles es hashura. How much hatred can have an effect. Shura meaning the normal path, and hatred can spoil the path of the regular routine. Why? Shechavash hu ba'atzma. After all, Bilam was so great amongst the Goyim, he could have had somebody do it for him. So we see, no, he himself went and prepared his donkey that he should be able to travel. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Rebbe says, Rosha, kvar kodmach Avraham aviyim. Avraham, their father, already was ahead of you. Shenema, we find by the Akedah, Vayashkem Avraham baboiker, vayachfish es chamoir. That Avraham has rose in the early morning, and when he went together with Yitzchak, when he took Yitzchak to the Akedah. So the Rebbe asked several questions in this Rashi. First of all, what need is it for Rashi to mention here about Avraham? In fact, when we learn in the Akedah, Rashi there already says it. Rashi there says, Mikan, Sha'ahava mikalkeles es ashura. How much love can accomplish for one to go out of the path. Avram had such great love to the Rebishter that when he received the commandment from the Rebishter to go ahead and take Yitzchak as an oila, he went right away and did it himself. He didn't wait for anyone to do it. He didn't want anyone to do it. He did it himself without anyone's assistance. Vayachvoish, saying the Rashi in Vayera, hu ba'atzmai, he himself. And he did not command to any of his servants to do it for him. Why? Same thing. Out of love to the Rebishter, it spoils the regular routine path. Normally it's not befitting for a person like Avram's caliber to go ahead and prepare his chamayr himself. However, this was something which he wanted to do with such love, with such anxiety, with such hislahavos, that he did it himself. Weiter we find in Rashi here, in Pasuk Chav Beis, that when Bilam traveled, he traveled to Shnei Na'orav Imoy. He had two Na'orim, two servants with him. What does Rashi comment? Mikan la'odam choshev hayoytze l'derech. When a noble person goes out on the road, he should have two people with him. Yoylech ima shnei anoshim l'shamshay. V'choizrem u'mishamshim zeh. There should be people to be able to service one another. Actually, if we look back to Rashi by Avram Avinu, we find a similar inyan. What does Rashi say there? Why did Avram take Shnei Na'orav Yishmael and Eliezer? Because Ein Adam Choshev Rishoi Lotzis Laderech B'loi Beis Anoshim. It's not befitting for a choshev, a person, not only it's not befitting, a choshev, a person is not allowed to, Rashi says in Bereshis, to go out unless he has two people with him. She'im yitztarech ha'echad l'nkova. If one will have to go away for a few minutes, the other one should be around. In order, he shouldn't have to be himself even for 1 second. So Rashi already says it in Parshas Chumash Bereshis and Parshas Vayera. Still, we see Rashi brings about the same idea by Bilam, but Rashi changes it a little bit. In Bereshis, Rashi says, an Adam Choshev is not allowed to go unless he has two people with him. Here in Chukas-Balak, Rashi says, Mikan, from here we see, Adam Choshev, Hayoytze L'derech, he should take with him two people. Also we notice, by Avram the expression is, Vayashkem Avram Baboker. Avram rose at a very, very early time. Here by Bilam the expression is Vayakom Bilam Baboker. Not the expression Vayashkem, as opposed to Vayakom. What is the difference? Vayashkem is a much earlier rising as Vayakom Bilam Baboker. So when Avram took Yitzchak to the Akedah, he woke up much earlier. The Pasuk also uses the expression he rose very early. However, by Bilam the expression is Vayakom Bilam Baboker. As the Rebbe explained it, very simple. The reason why here Rashi can't bring out that an Adam Choshev is not allowed to travel himself, as Rashi explains by Avram Avinu, because here Bilam didn't travel himself. Bilam had the Sarei Moav with him. In addition to the Sarei Moav, he took along two servants. But you can't say that a person is not allowed to travel himself, and based on that, he had Shnei Na'orim Imay. This we cannot say. Why? Because he wasn't traveling himself. He had the Sarei Moav. Weiter, Bilam. Why, if Bilam was so anxious to go, as we see that he himself went, and as Rashi uses the expression, Sina mekalkeles es Ashura, why didn't he rise like Avram Avinu did? Vayashkem Bilam baboker. Very simple. Being that he didn't travel himself, he was very anxious to go, but he had to take along the Sarei Moav with him. The Sarei Moav weren't up so early; they weren't ready to leave so early. Avram Avinu went to take Yitzchak on the Akedah, so Avram saw to it that he should wake up early. Yitzchak woke up early, and he woke up Yishmael and Eliezer as well. However, the Sarei Moav couldn't care less if they'll go a little bit later as well. So that's why the pasuk can't use the expression here, Vayashkem Bilam Baboker, because Bilam could have gotten up Baboker. It wouldn't have helped him. So therefore, he waited a little bit later, a later category of Boker, and at that time it was Vayokom Bilam Baboker and Vayachvesh es Hasoin. Aber also bewarnt, by Avram, he had to take along Yishmael and Eliezer. It wasn't sufficient that he had Yitzchak with him, because Avram was under the impression that Yitzchak is going to become an Eilah. Memele Yitzchak wouldn't be able to come back with him. So that is why he took, besides Yitzchak, he had two other people with him. He had with him Yishmael and Eliezer. And the Rebbe also stressed how we see from Rashi saying here, Oma HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Roshe, Kvar Kodmach Avram Aviyim, Shenema Vayashkem Avram Babayker, being that, why did Bilam travel here? Bilam traveled here to find faults on the Yidden. As we see weiter that he went to a high spot and he wanted to see from the area where the Yidden sinned with the Egel. So Bilam wanted to bring about faults on Klal Yisrael. So that is why Rashi says, Kvar Kodmach Avram Aviyim. Avram, he's the father of these people. And as the father of these people, he did something, which we know by Yidden there's an inyan of schus avos. If a father does something, it has an impact later, it helps later to later generations as well. Memela, being Avram Aviyim did something where he also got involved into something himself. Vayashkem Avram Babayka, he rose at a very early morning, and Vayachvish es Chamorai, because of Ahava that is Mekalkeles es Ashura. So this will serve as a preventive now, that it wouldn't lead to it, that Bilam should be able to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish, Chas v'sholom an Yidden, whatever Avram did much earlier, being that Avram is Aviyim of these people, so in sort of schus avos, for what Avram did, this wouldn't allow Bilam to accomplish whatever he wanted. The Farbrengen, the Rebbe also, at the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe reminded, says though it's something which is very popular and does not need to be reminded, but at the same time it's appropriate that on the day of Yud Beis Tammuz to remind about something which the Frierdiker Rebbe has instituted, and that is the Shiurim of Chumash, Tilim, and Tanya, the Shiurim of Chitas. The Shiurim of Chitas, to learn the Shia Chumash accordingly every day, as well as the Shia Tilim, as Tilim is divided according to the month, and Tanya, as the Frierdiker Rebbe divided it from one Yutes Kislev to the other Yutes Kislev. And talking about Pashas HaShavua, the Rebbe says this week is a very special Parsha, the Seder of Pashas Chukas-Balak, because in Balak there are psukim which Rashi, but not only Rashi, the interesting part of it is that we find the Rambam in Yad HaChazaka, which is a Sefer of Halacha, the Rambam's Halacha Sefer. In Hilchas Melachim and Mulcham Esayim, where the Rambam discusses what the world is going to be like when Mashiach will come, the Rambam quotes psukim from this week's Sedra and interprets them b'negei the coming of Mashiach. So we see that this week's Sedra is a Sedra of real special meaning. Though all in Yonim and Torah are, one cannot differentiate between one inyan in Torah and another inyan in Torah, still the Rebbe says we find, for example, Chumash Vayikra. Chumash Vayikra is the Chumash that has the most halachas within it as opposed to all other Chumashim. And this Chumash is called Chumash Ari. It's entitled as a lion. Why? Because it's stronger, so to speak, in spiritual sense, than all other Chumashim. Why? Because it has more halachas within it. So we do see that we do give special tribute to certain Chumashim at times, or to Sedras at times, and in this case, B'negei, this week's Sedra, it's a very special Sedra, because this is a Sedra which has psukim within it that talk about the coming of Mashiach. Another inyan which the Frierdiker Rebbe has related is B'negei, that this is something which the Magid gave over the Kabbalah from the Baal Shem Tov, that everyone should say every day the kapitel of his age. In other words, if a person is 20 years old and he says kapitel Chav Aleph, etc., that means he's in the 21st year. When he's 30, he says kapitel Lamed Aleph, and so forth. And B'negei, Yud Beis Tammuz, it is not only the day that the Frierdiker Rebbe was released from prison, but Yud Beis Tammuz is also the Frierdiker Rebbe's birthday. And though the Frierdiker Rebbe is already ba'olam, in a different olam, so the Rebbe referred that the Frierdiker Rebbe once related how his father, the Rebbe Rashab, after he had already passed away, came to him in Cholim and said a maimah. It was on the base on Chav Cheshvan. Chav Cheshvan is the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, and said a maimah on Kapitel Pei on the 80th Kapitel. The Rebbe Rashab did not live in this world for 80 years; he passed away much earlier. But it was when he reached age of 80. So, and the Rebbe Rashab was already in Olam HaEmes, Gan Eden, and the Frierdiker Rebbe saw him in his dream, whereby he said a maimah for him that has a shaykhs to Kapitel Pei. And Mela, based on that, the Kapitel which the Frierdiker Rebbe is entering into this year is Kapitel Kuf Gimel, Kapitel 103. And a Kapitel Kuf Gimel is a Kapitel which has 5 times the expression of Bochi Nafshi within it, and this is something which the Medrash says is something very special for this reason. It's a certain special type of praise which David HaMelech used when he used the expression Bochi Nafshi, but there's a very other strong pasuk in this. Also, there's a pasuk Kerachim of Albonim Richam Hashem al Yereyav. Just like a father has pity on his children, Hashem should have pity on those who fear him. And as the Rebbe added on, it is all Yidden that fall into this category. In Kapitel Kuf Beis, which this is last year's Kapitel, which we concluded today as well, there's also a very famous pasuk. Saper b'tzion Shem Hashem u'sihilosei b'Yerushalayim. That the time will come that we should be able to praise the Shem Hashem in Tzion and in Yerushalayim. So the Rebbe concluded that may we see that both of these psukim, the pasuk, which is this very outstanding pasuk of Kapitel Kuf Beis, as well as the outstanding pasuk of Kapitel Kuf Gimel, which is Kerachim of Albonim, Richam Hashem el Yereyav, we should see to it that these psukim should be fulfilled. Nowadays, we should see to it they should be fulfilled immediately. One more inyan which the Rebbe mentioned, while the Rebbe spoke about the greatness of learning Torah, the Rebbe added on one of the highest levels in learning Torah is la'asukish shmaitasa libe de hilchasa. That is an Aramaic expression that when one succeeds in learning and coming down to the psak halacha in learning. In other words, not only does he learn Torah, but he comes to the outcome of the result of the learning, how we are to do b'negei halacha. So here the Rebbe said that it's very appropriate and extremely appropriate that everybody should see to it to know the dinim, the halachas that we have to do daily. There are halachas in Hilchas Tefillah the Rebbe mentioned, as well as Hilchas Brachas. These are the Cheluk Avera Chaim. These are daily halachas, and it is everyone's obligation to see to it that we know these halachas in detail. And most particularly, the Rebbe referred to Hilchas Shabbos. Hilchas Rapsil Shabbat. There are many, many details of B'negei Hilchas Shabbos, and unfortunately they are not that known, and every din in Shabbos can involve many times in Issa De'araisa, and it is extremely important to see to it that we make it our business to acquaint ourselves in halachas in general, and particularly in Hilchas Shabbos. To see the importance of Hilchas Shabbos, the Rebbe says if we look into Igeres HaKodesh, which is the last part of the Tanya, the Kunter HaSachin, which is the real last part of it, Kunter HaSachin is various letters from the Alter Rebbe. Who put together these letters? The Bnei HaMechaber. It is the children of the Alter Rebbe, the children of the author, who they have arranged these letters that this should be put into the Tanya and be part of the Tanya. The last letter, which is in Kunter HaSachin, the very last, which is the close off of the Sefer HaTanya, which is, and usually we know how careful we are when we close off something, the end should be with a very extreme important inyan. What does the Alter Rebbe discuss in that letter? The importance of being familiar in Hilchas Shabbos. Shomer v'zacher, the greatness of Shabbos, and one being familiar in all the halachas of Shabbos. So here we see the Rebbe says, we see the same from the Alter Rebbe's children, how they demanded from us that it is our obligation to acquaint ourselves and be very familiar in all the halachas of Shabbos. Towards the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also reminded that it is customary that in the Yud-Beis Tamas Farbrengen, usually contributions are made for a special fund which go into the Rebbe. It goes for institutions which are named after the Frierdiker Rebbe, after the Bala Simcha V'Hagula. And being that today is Shabbos, this cannot be done. However, the Rebbe said tomorrow's day is an opportune day to hand in these contributions, and those that wish can hand it in to the Rebbe's office, and on the note also add their names and their mother's name, and then the Rebbe will mention the name and the mother's name of a particular person and families on the yoyo.